All right. I want to thank Mary for caffeinated beverage. The only thing in the rector, your priests are way too healthy. Everything was decaf in the house. My hours of sleep right now, it's really fun. This is how I always wanted it to be, and when I was out here, it totally was hard. But now I go to bed at 3 in the morning and wake up about 10. When I was here, I think I got up at 4:30 because they were milking cows or something 31 years ago. Highway K was 1 lane, I think. Oh my gosh. But we could reminisce for a long time. We got a lot to talk about tonight. It is good to be back. My one regret about O'Fallon was while I was here, I think I gained 40 pounds. I really do. I think I gained literally about 30, 40 pounds while I was here. And it was because of the cafeteria ladies who kept feeding me. I was wet behind the ears and I didn't know any better, so I kept eating. And oh my gosh, so many homemade pies. They're the love of my life to this day. This doesn't have to go on the video, right? At all. But it's great to be back. And the process tonight will be, I'm going to just do a conversational style with you tonight. I'd like to reflect on the experience of relationships in our lives. There's nobody in this room who hasn't been involved in relationships, obviously in one way or another. At some level or another, we're all engaged in relationship. And it's the one part of our lives that can always get better. And if you don't know that starting out here this evening, then nothing else needs to be said because nothing else could be said. If you don't know you could get better at caring about that person next to you and learning how to be cared for by that person sitting next to you and those back at home and those you call your friends, if you don't know you can get better at that, then there's no reason really to go on. But I trust you're here because you wanted to make good things even better. And so I'm going to throw out some thoughts, some sort of random thoughts, and yet I hope somewhat consistent, and then open it up. The thoughts will be sort of scattershot about different areas that I think we need to look at if we really want to be free and get better at this stuff. So I'll be going through that, throwing out those different themes that I think we need to reflect on. If anything occurs to you that you would like to follow up, just kind of file that in your brain. If you're anything like me, 30 seconds later, you'll forget it. I don't know if feel free to write down whatever question you might have that might be significant. If I'm clearing my throat a lot, it's just because Joe just bought me dinner and I don't know what I had, but it was really good. It was white cream sauce. It was excellent. All right. Makes sense? That's the process. And then afterwards, I hope to stick around to chat if anybody has further questions they'd like to talk about. And we'll keep it about an hour, maybe just a little bit over an hour in terms of the major reflection. All right, let's just take a minute, less than a minute actually, about 20 seconds, to just center ourselves, take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you're given to that or not. Take a couple of deep breaths. Remind yourself that you are here. And ask yourself, how am I doing tonight? Where does it hurt to be me right now? Where did I feel the cross today? Whether it was like a little pinprick or a big old dagger sword. Where did it hurt today to be me? And then ask yourself, where did I see love today? The day's not over, far from it. But where did I experience love? Either in the giving or the receiving, or both. Where was love? And then if you would, please repeat after me. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I am here.
I am here.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
You are here.
You are here.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
We are here.
We are here.
And then if you would, the triple sign of the cross with me. First on your forehead. Holy God, open our minds to a bigger truth than we've ever known before. And then on your heart. Oh my God, open my heart to the gift of your love in this place. And then on our lips. Oh my God, open our lips to proclaim your praise. Amen. Those first two questions I asked you to think about as we began with that little moment of prayer are the two questions I close every day with. Every day, I don't know if you're my age, if you remember the old examination of conscience. And I've sort of whittled that down to just those two questions that I end every day with. Where did it hurt to be Gary today? Where did I come up against difficulty of any sort, inside of me or outside of me? Where does it hurt? I've never had a night where I couldn't answer it, even in a tiny way. And then the other question, the question that I take to sleep with me is, and where did I see love today? Where did I experience love? Because God is love. And wherever love is, God is. That's a good thing. Have you ever heard of Aaron Ralston? Anybody remember the name Aaron Ralston? Anybody shoot your hand up if you know the name. Aaron Ralston. Aaron Ralston was the guy who was out hiking in the mountains of the desert all by himself. When it starts to ring true, raise your hand if you remember the story. Yeah. Yes. He was hiking in the mountains, in a cavern actually, in a crevasse of the rocks. He was all by himself, nobody knew where he was, and he slipped and fell into this crevasse, and his arm was pinned under a giant boulder. And he couldn't move it. Do you remember the story? It just goes back a couple years now. He could not move his arm. I think he was there for like 3 days, starving to death. He had run out of water, and he knew that he was going to die. But it occurred to him, as he began to hallucinate and lose some of his faculties, that there's only one thing that he could do that would possibly help him to become free. And he thought it through from beginning to end, totally clearly. And he took out his pocket knife, a pocket knife, and began to sever his arm. And he cut, and he cut, and he cut through the skin, and the muscle, and the blood, and the bone, and made his way to freedom. What struck me as incredibly powerful about that story is the extremes he was willing to go to get free. And the question I'm left with in my own life is, how far am I willing to go? What am I willing to suffer to get free? If I knew it took this much work, this much reading, this much counseling, this much conversation, to get freer and better at love, at the giving and receiving of love, would I do it? Is my life and my loves, are they worth it? Are they worth it for you to suffer for? How far will you go to get free? How far will you go to be able to love that human being sitting next to you right now, or the ones back home, or the folks at work, or your kids, or your parents? How far will you go to be free enough to love them? What he did was extreme. I think no less is called for from us than that. Extreme measures to be able to love. Your choice to be here tonight says clearly to me, but I don't care what it says to me. I hope what it says to you is you're going to go this far at least. You're going to give up a Monday night to do some thinking and soul searching and wondering and questions so that you can be freer to give and to receive love. Your choice to be here says that, and you need to, I think you need to be grateful to yourself for giving yourself the gift of this night, but even more than just to yourself, to your friendships and to your marriage and to your family life. You gave yourself a gift to be here. You went out of your way. Hopefully it won't be quite as painful as severing that arm, but something may come up tonight that you want to really look at, that you want to really give some serious consideration to, that you might want to journal about or go for a walk about sometime this week. And Lent helps it be possible, you know? This season makes those kinds of sacrifices and that kind of work a little more digestible. Maybe, maybe not. But I hope you can say thanks to yourself tonight for giving yourself this. How far would you go to be able to love better than you already do? My assumption tonight, speaking of assumption, is that love is the greatest force in the universe. Love is the greatest force in the universe, bar none. It was the originating explosion in what we've come to call the Big Bang that radiated out into all matter and into every human heart in this room, every one of us. Love is the greatest force in the universe. And no force, no power, not supernovas, not rivers carving Grand Canyons, nothing is equal to the power of love to change your life and the lives of those that you do indeed love. It is the greatest force in the universe. So much so that I think the greatest insight of the whole Bible, that the Catholic Christian tradition has totally called its own, and rightly so, is that God is love. And when you love somebody, you're in God, whether you know it or not. Because the least wrong thing I can ever say about God is that God is love. How then could I not say that love is the greatest force in the universe? We have miles to go before we sleep, because love is a mystery, not to be solved, but to be appreciated and experienced. There's an old saying, if you're my age or above, actually I'm going to say if you're 40 or above, which is probably most of us, our generation, we were couples learning how to become individuals. The next generation, those 40 and younger, are individuals learning how to become couples. The truth of that for people more my age is that we sometimes over-identified in relationship and really didn't know who we were outside of relationship. That's just what was always expected. That's how it always was. And some of us got married really young and thrived in friendships. You know, we started out knowing that we wanted to be in a relationship, but we didn't know how to be ourselves. We didn't know how to have a voice. We didn't know how to have needs. We didn't know how to work that out in context of, how do I be with this other person and be me? How do I become more me while I'm with this person? So we were couples learning how to be individuals, but I can tell you for college kids, the last 17 years, I see it confirmed over and over again, that's not their starting point. Their starting point is they were raised to be individuals. Very empowered oftentimes, very independent. And they are individuals trying to learn how, desperately trying to learn how to be a couple. And it's not always working. But it didn't always work for us either. But that's how I see it. That's what I see happening. And to get through those processes, whether you were over-identified in what we call codependent in relationships, over-identified with the other, or under-identified with the other now, which is the other extreme, one way or another, it's always going to be a lot of work. And it's going to involve some sacrifice. And for this generation coming up behind us, it's the sacrifice of individuality and autonomy. And it's taking a toll. I can talk about that more if you'd like to later, but suffice it to say just that. The work is learning how to be myself with another human being who is also learning how to be him or herself. And that's work. And sometimes it's going to involve a hunger to be closer and a hunger to be freer. And I just want to suggest to you tonight that you got to love the hunger. Love the hunger. You know, I lost 83 pounds. Partly because I had to because of you all. But I lost 83 pounds now, almost, I'm going to guess, about 26 years ago. And people say, Gary, how'd you do it? I went from a 42, 44 waist to a 32, 34. And pretty much maintained. I'm not boasting, I'm grateful. I'm grateful, 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 I can't even tell you. But people say, how'd you do it? And even the government studied me. Because apparently, I know, go figure, and another major funding. But the two things I had to learn, one was to love myself fat. Really, I tried so hard to lose weight to love myself more. I had to love myself fat, and it was amazing what that led to and opened up for me. The other is I had to love myself hungry, or even more, I'm going to say, I had to love the hunger. I had to love the actual experience of being hungry. If I didn't do that, I would feel sorry for myself. How come I'm hungry and she's not? How come he can eat all that and have that model body and I don't and won't? And so to love the hunger became a very creative and a powerful place in my life. That little space where food used to be, you know, to push away from the table just before I'm full, which I didn't always succeed at this, by the way. Joe would be the first to tell you, because I don't go to confession without confessing my eating. But to love the hunger was a great source of freedom for me, from food being my God. But I got to tell you, as a celibate man in the church now for 30 years, I think people say, how do you live without a woman? And I'm sure most of you are right now, if you've been married for a while. But anyway, I got to tell you, I love coming places where I feel young again. At Washington University, I feel very old. But there's a place for loving even touch hunger, the hunger for touch. To learn how to love the hunger for touch for me was also a place of great freedom. And I know that doesn't apply to you in your life, but my point is to love the hunger itself, to love the desire and not the requiting of the desire is a remarkable, remarkable experience. And I want to suggest to you who are in relationships, be they a friendship or marriage or family, parenting, whatever, every single relationship, every single couple counseling I do is about needs not being met. Mine or hers, theirs or mine. Somebody's needs are not getting met. They're just not. And it leads to all this anger and disappointment and discouragement and disillusionment. It's because needs aren't being met. And I think the culture has deceived us to begin to think that we have a right to have our needs met. Dang it. I'm in this relationship. I sacrifice so much. What about my needs here? And that's a valid question. I mean, it really matters. It does. And your needs do matter. And they need to matter to the other person and to you. That's what I said about finding your own voice. But you can also love the desire to have your needs met. That there's a creative place between what you want and what you're not getting where God can come. I hope that doesn't sound too over abstract, because it's as visceral for me as my desire for a woman or my desire for 2 hamburgers instead of 1. I'm telling the truth. Every need we have does not need to be requited. There's freedom in loving the desire to have that need met. There is, and in that place between the want and the unmet need, you can meet God. If you look at all of the virtues in our Catholic tradition, they're born right there. The virtuous life is born between what I want, what I long for, what I desire, and not always getting it. Husbands and wives, take note. Sometimes when you're frustrated and your needs are not being met all the way, you don't have to let them go all the time, but sometimes say, thank you, God. that need wasn't being met because what I can meet of you now in this. Thank you, God, for meeting me in the unrequited desire. You would cut down my appointments in a day half. Because every fight is about somebody's needs not being met. Sometimes both. Washington University, like most colleges, is a hookup culture. Do you know what I mean by a hookup culture? Pretty much one-night stands. A lot of one-night stands. And a lot of the kids in college these days are trying to get past that, but they don't know how when everybody around them is doing it. And they don't know how to meet guys, and they don't know how to meet girls that aren't expecting to just hook up that night, the first or second night of the relationship. And I have done workshops all over the university, probably 30 just this year. And there's not been a single workshop with it where a young man or a young woman hasn't said, Father Gary, how do I not go that way? And how do I open up depth instead of hooking up all the time? How do I open up the possibility of depth without looking like a fool or being made fun of or sitting home alone next Saturday night because he or she's going to be with somebody who's going to hook up? Not me. Huge question. Huge question. And, you know, one of the things I believe about every sin is there's a spectrum, and that might not be your and my issue, casual, superficial sex. But our issue on that same spectrum is casual, surface life. And their cry to meet another person where there's a level of depth and significance is the cry of every single human being in this room. I believe with all my heart. We don't know how to say it. We don't know how to ask for it. We don't know how to get there, especially when this other person doesn't seem to want to go there with us. But it's what we deepest down most want is depth and significance. We want to go to bed at night feeling like something happened that day. That we got to know some human being, hopefully our spouse too, better. There was something substantial about our day. And that's what I hear them crying out for. We're all on that continuum. We're no different than 18-year-old college kids, you and I, trying to figure out how to get there without that. We're with them in it. So lest we be too finger-wagging at our young folks for going to sex so quickly, the hookup culture, maybe there's other ways we hook up that avoid the deepest down stuff from happening, that keep it from happening. The only thing I know lonelier than being alone is being with somebody in the very same bed and being lonely. If you'd like, we can explore the experience of loneliness later tonight. I think we need some attitude adjustments, all of us. You know, just try to tune that dial a little better. I got a new little battery-operated radio that I listen to in the shower because I want to hear some of those talk shows in the morning. And it's always getting off the dial, and it takes it forever because I think it costs $1.20. But it's hard to catch the clear thing. And I think a lot of us need an attitude adjustment. I'm going to propose two things, an attitude adjustment and a behavioral adjustment to some of our stuff. And again, hold your questions if they start coming up. Or if you need me to clarify what I'm actually saying, I'd be fine if you raised your hand in the middle of it. Attitude adjustment. Attitude adjustment. The gift of Eastern spirituality to Western spirituality, we're in the West, we're based out of Rome. The gift of Eastern spirituality is they have a little clarity that sometimes we don't have, though we're totally on the page. They have some clarity that a lot of our suffering is needless. And the reason we suffer is because we have expectations of things that will never be met. We have expectations that won't be met in this life, maybe for a moment. Maybe a tiny bit, maybe even for a while, but not for long. And we'll always be disappointed because of our expectations. And that's some of the hurt we take to sleep with us at night, is just that, expectations that can't be met. I think one of our expectations that will never be met is that that person sitting next to you, if you're here with your spouse, is an angel instead of a human. Now you might say, oh, Father Gary, I never expected her to be an angel. Or even a god, except every once in a while. Nevertheless, you married a human being who's finite, limited, always, always, always limited and finite, always going to make mistakes, always going to err, always not going to be able to understand you because you don't even understand yourself. Why are you asking somebody else to understand you? Always. You married a human being, a fallible mortal. That means they're going to hurt you. That means someday they're going to leave you. Or you them. Every marriage ends through divorce or through death. Every marriage ends. That sucks. Both are awful. So, one of the gifts you can give yourself tonight is to think about that again and say, do I let my spouse be mortal? Do I let my spouse be finite? Do I let my spouse be imperfect? Because that's the definition of human, not angel. Human, imperfect. How often do you celebrate the humanity of your spouse? Instead of having this subtle expectation that they're going to meet every one of those needs. And then going through hell when they don't. Your expectations are so subtle sometimes you don't even know you got them, and they're causing you pain. Now there's some suffering I will rejoice in with you, but I'm not going to rejoice with you in unnecessary suffering. Ever. Another attitude adjustment. That our long-term friendships are supposed to, our long-term relationships, which is what marriage is going to be thrilling most of the time. Now, a lot of you have been around long enough to know that's not true. But when you meet somebody else who's kind of thrilling, you start to wonder, why isn't my marriage more thrilling? How come I feel so different when I'm with the woman or man working next to me here down the hall at work than I do with my wife I come home to every night for 17 years? Why is that? And then all of a sudden we start to get all upset with ourselves or think we made a mistake in this marriage. I've had so many couples. You know, I've been around 31 years, like Joe said, a priest now, starting here, and I've done a million weddings, and there's so many times a man or woman has come back to me after doing their wedding and said, you know, Father Gary, I think I made a mistake. I love this other woman more than I've ever loved a woman in my life. And I won't use the explicit vocabulary with you tonight that I use with them. Let me abbreviate it to BS. Because what I say to him is, you're lying. I knew you when you fell in love with her. And it was just like this. Don't you tell me that you didn't feel this 20 years ago. I was there. But what happens is we have a lot of other thrilling relationships. We get a lot from a lot of other people that our spouse, because they're human, can't give us. They have their filters. They have their blind spots. They have their stuff. And so if we keep wanting that from this primary relationship, so let me use an image that I think really works for long-term relationship, which is marriage. And it's been true for Joe and I over 34 years. I've learned more about marriage, believe it or not, from trying to love that butthead. Don't quote me. Oh, we're on video. No, I love him to pieces. Do you know what a base camp is in mountain climbing? If you've seen movies like Into Thin Air, if you read books about climbing mountains, what you know is that there's always a base camp they establish at a certain level. And base camp is where they ascend from and descend to, and ascend from and descend to. And in base camp, everything is that they need. Their supplies, their relationships, their encouragement, the pep talk sometimes, the understanding, the dailiness, the ordinariness, but everything they need to make the ascent is in base camp. But base camp is not the top of the mountain. Base camp is not thrilling. Nobody looks forward really to go into base camp. Sometimes you do when you're tuckered out and you just want to get some food, some grub, and some good laughs and some songs around a campfire. Just like in marriage. But marriage is where you ascend from. That's the top. Up here is your career. Up here is your hobbies. Up here is your other friendships. but you got to bring it home. You go from this marriage to become your best out there in the world, and then you come back for the grub and the camp songs and the love. But it's not the nature of marriage to be the mountaintop. The nature of marriage is to be the base camp and to have the expectation that it's going to be that thrill and get so many couples in trouble. Do you know what the divorce rate is for the first 12 months of marriages in this country right now? That's the first year? 20%. 20%, what is that, 1 out of 5? One, yeah, sorry. Anybody want to do my taxes? 1 out of every 5 marriages is ending in the first year in this country right now, in 12 months. And the speculated reason is because they start with such high expectations that this is going to be thrilling all the time. And you're not marrying a mortal human being. And so they wake up after 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 months and go, is this all there is? Well, if you learn to love base camp, that's all it is. But it's awesome. And you can ascend from this. That's what I'm saying. There's tons of thrills, but it's got to come back home. So I always, when I do marriage prep, I always tell couples, bring it home. Just bring it home. You know, if you get a little infatuations out here and all of a sudden you find yourself eroticized by this or that, this other person, and everybody gets, I mean, unless you're dead. I mean, Cardinal Cartwright told me one time, he said, Gary, your impure thoughts are not going to stop till 10 minutes after you're dead. It's the only time he was right on the mark, I'm sure. But my point is, when those eroticizations happen up there and those exciting other friendships and stuff, just bring it home. Talk about it here. Bring the feelings home. If this is for you married folks, and I think most of you are, if you get turned on by something else out there, just bring home and make better love to your spouse when you get home. Just bring it home. I've said that in so many marriage preps, and I called an old friend of mine the other day. I did her wedding and her husband's wedding about 17 years ago. Her name's Sharon. She lives kind of close, actually, to CSC. And I said, Sharon, what's going on? What you doing? She goes, I'm bringing it home, Gary. I said, I'll call back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. They're married 17 years. They got 4 little kids. I'm bringing it home, Gary. Just bring it home. Marriage is a base camp. It's not the top of the mountain. It's the base camp. It's where everything is. Just savor that for 1 second. Marriage, long-term friendships. Joe is so base camp in my life. It's so good to have that friendship to come back to. I send the heights down at WashU, and we both work our tails off, and he here with you, but we bring it back to that fundamental friendship all the time. It's just an amazing gift. And that's what I see marriage. That's my understanding of marriage. And anything else, it feels like to me, causes more pain. Causes more pain. Another thing, I'm going to do a shameless sales pitch for God. You really can't love another human being freely. You really can't unless you have a God. But if your spouse doesn't happen to be a believer, then at least come up with a North Star you can both share. Because if you don't have a God bigger than him or her, or even you together, you're always going to want them to be God. A marriage will not thrive unless it has a North Star, unless it has a God. Our North Star for love is Jesus of Nazareth and his story. His total self-gift. I mean, that's how I measure myself in all my friendships and in all my work. So do we all, I hope. Here, we need a North Star. We need a God. Else it ain't going to work. And the other thing is, the other attitude adjustment, if you will, is that we think we're ever going to get good at this. Unbelievable. One of the greatest wisdoms I was ever taught, and I learned it early in the seminary actually, is that when it comes to love, when it comes to loving God or any human being, we're always only beginning. Always only beginning. That takes a lot of humility to admit that. There are, well, let me go to behavior adjustments very quickly. Jealousy. Jealousy is one of the behaviors that really complicates, gets in the way, and blocks love. Now, your experience of jealousy might be as different as fingerprints from the person next to you. Let me tell you right now, jealousy is not a feeling, it's not an emotion, it's an attitude. It's an attitude, it's a behavior to jealousy is. It's not a feeling, because I might feel jealous and feel very anxious. Wow, if she leaves me, will I be okay? You might get jealous and be just angry, raging at the person who might be interfering with this relationship or not. Somebody else might get totally sad, just really in melancholy, just, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm worth loving. That person is so much more beautiful, so much more talented. Jealousy might not be your issue tonight, but I just want to expose it for the lie that it is. Though none of us really doesn't feel it sometimes. Maybe it's about money, popularity, or this person's love. The truth is, you got to make a decision tonight. Is love a pie like this? And you may have heard Joe talk about this too, because we talk about it a lot. Is love like this, and there's just so many pieces of this pie, and if I love you, Mary, then that's one less piece of my love for Phyllis? Is that how it works? Is love a pie? Is there just so much love? Or does it spring from this incredibly infinite source that the more I love, the more love I know, the more I give of myself, the more capacity I have to give of myself, the more I forgive, the more power I have to forgive, and it's this unstoppable cycle that just keeps going. How many moms have told me when they're holding their firstborn in their hand and they're pregnant with their second, Gary, I don't know if I have enough in me to love another kid like I love this first one. And I just smile. Because you know what happens. It keeps coming. Love is infinite and unlimited. If I love you, there's not less love that I have to give somebody else. If I love you, I got more love for those other people. If I love somebody else, I have more love for you. It just keeps exponential increases. So you got to decide right now. I mean, if jealousy is your issue, I just want to take 1 second and say, how do I see love? Is it a quantitative thing? Just so much that I can give and nothing else? Or is it an infinite thing? Another basic issue is trusting conflict. I think we know this, but if I could put 2 words on every mirror of every couple's bathroom, it would be trust, conflict. It will create you. As a matter of fact, I won't do a wedding for a couple that hasn't gone through conflict before they decide to get married. Because that says to me they don't trust it. It's not a death knell. It's nothing to be afraid of. Good Friday, Easter Sunday. Break down, break through. The only way you will get purged of your false ego, the one thing that will keep you from heaven, is because somebody brought it to your attention or some conflict brought it to the surface. And then you can deal with it. Trust conflict. And probably the last thing I want to say on this part about behavior modifications is I have some very dear friends that are married about 32, 33 years, and I'd say they have one of the best marriages I know, but they had this recurring issue. She's somebody who kept wanting to connect with her husband. He's somebody who just loved to kind of do his own thing. He loves his wife, totally loves his wife, but he'd build his day, he loved his business and loved to garden. And she's always like waiting around to connect with him. And it just kept having these recurring fights. And I remember the husband saying to me one time, Gary, he says, sometimes I can't believe how hard marriage is. I just can't get over it, and how long the hard times last sometimes. But he was given a talk to our kids, and I know this would happen, but I never heard him put it all together like this before. He was talking to a bunch of our young adults about a year ago right now, actually. And there were about 60 of the graduate students and young adults there. And they were talking about marriage, and he said that I want to share with you guys, he said, an epiphany. He called it an epiphany that he had. And his epiphany was this. So much of my suffering in this relationship is because I keep resisting who Peggy is. I keep fighting that in her. And because I keep fighting that in her, I suffer. And I'm going to keep suffering unless I learn how to stop resisting who she is. And he started crying. And then I started crying. Because I knew how true it was. And I knew their marriage was on a totally different level the last couple of years. And I knew Tom had shared part of this story with me, but it was just so clear to me. I just couldn't stop welling up with tears. And I was sitting in the back, thanks be to God, because I hate when I lose control in front of the kids and just, and I don't even cry hardly ever, but every once in a while I just, and, but then I did a dumb thing. I asked a question and it was the wrong question. It was a guy question. Every once in a while my guyness gets in the way and I raise my hand. I go, well, Tom, why doesn't Peggy quit resisting who you are then? Wrong question. Peggy's eyes got worried. But actually Tom handled it superbly. He said, Gary, he said, I can only do my work. This is what I had to do to end my suffering. But one thing I know is when one person changes in a relationship, the relationship changes. How many of us spend our day resisting other people for who they are, whether it's politically, leaders in our church, your pastor, your bishop, and we get ourselves in all these snits and all these knots because other people aren't doing it the way we would do it, or don't dress like we think they should dress, or dot, 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 and we're suffering, we're the ones suffering, and it's not changing anything. When will we stop resisting that in each other, who they are? So I thought that was an amazing, his epiphany became mine, and I can't tell you in the last year how the impact it's had on me with my friends, the leaders in our church, you know, local leaders that I have to work with all the time at WashU. It's just changed a lot. Let me jump right ahead to say 3 more things really briefly, and 2 of them are connected, and then I'll stop talking. Somebody said a long time ago, and maybe it was even Joe, so you might have heard it. It's a word of a parent to a child, but I think it applies to all of our relationships. I want to hold you without holding on to you. I promise to hold you without holding on to you. To find that line is some of the greatest work we will ever do. Some of us err on holding too tightly. That'd be me. Some of us err on being too detached and uninvested, unengaged. I promise to hold you without holding on to you. And in that same light, let me share just a line that one person said to another after many, many years of marriage. And it was getting near the ending of things and the winding down of life. And I don't know who said the first line to whom, but one of the partners said to the other, I promise that if you die first, you will die in my arms. And if I die first, I will die reaching out for your hand. The last thing I'll say overall is that before I open up for Q&A is I did a wedding not too long ago. I do weddings for some what you would call beautiful people, you know, the smartest and the brightest and some of the prettiest and handsomest. And this couple were none of the above. That was her wedding. No, it was not. But I'm going to call her Sharon, I said, Sharon, tell me what happened here. Tell me about this relationship. And she said, Father Gary, you know, you've known me a while here. And she said, I'm not the flashy one. And everybody else I look around, and they just seem so flashy to me, and I'm not. And I'm pretty much, you know, the one who other people don't look at for more than a couple seconds, and then they look over my shoulder. And they don't hang with me a lot at parties, you know. Maybe they'll talk to me a little bit and then move on because they get bored. But she said, this guy didn't. She said, it reminds me, the image I have, she said, of is 2 oysters kind of in the mud at the bottom of a lake. And all these beautiful fish are swimming over us. And we're down here in the mud. And this guy, this other oyster, turned to me and asked me a question. And when I started to respond, he saw a pearl inside of me. He saw something so beautiful in me that I didn't even know was there. That's the power of love. When I say it's the greatest power in the universe, I mean it with every fiber of my being. Aaron Ralston was willing to sever his arm to get free. Not just sever his arm, but with a pocket knife to get free. What work can we do, you and I? What sacrifices are we willing to make to be free, freer tomorrow than we are tonight? And most especially free to give and to receive love. The last couple Lents, I've put a pocket knife on my desk so that I don't stop asking that question. Thank you. Let's say when I give you a second, why don't you stand up for 1 minute, and then I'll call you to sit back down. Maybe if you want to be quiet for a second, just think about what might have occurred to you that you might want to pursue a little bit in what was just said. All right, take a deep breath, and you can sit back down. Is there anything you'd like to pursue, disagree with, add on to, or wonder about out loud? Please don't be shy. I know it's somewhat of a vulnerable topic, but I can assure you we're all on the spectrum. There's nothing you could ask that all of us haven't at least had to do with in a small way. Please.
You know, your story about Aaron made me think that he not only cut his arm off to be free, but to seek life.
Yeah. That's how strong desire can be in a person. He not only wanted to be free, but he wanted life, and life to the full. It reminds me of that line from Jesus, I came that you might have life and life to the full. Wow. I mean, the availability of the fullness of life to us, if we're willing to do what it takes, is phenomenal. But I want to add a little corrective there. When I talk about behavior modification or attitude adjustments to be more capable of love, I got to add that we only do these things to become more capable of love. It's like those giant antennas they have. Some of our kids at WashU are working full-time all through the summer, actually, to focus these like 67 huge antennas to outer space to listen. We don't create love, you and I. This is a deep truth of our church, and to think otherwise would be heretical, actually. Love is uncreated. Love is God. We only make ourselves more available to love as it comes through other human beings, through me to you. We only fix the aperture You know, in those old cameras, we don't have to do it anymore with these other digital things, but we used to have to adjust the lens, and it would open the aperture more or close it more. So many things in our lives, like these things I said we need to watch, pay attention to, are the aperture closing. Oh gosh, doesn't fear do that? Fear, just close the aperture. But these things I'm talking about are just ways to open our lives to the love that is, so that I and others can know it, so it can flow, like I said, through me to the other, through the other to me. And that's what I mean by being more capable of giving and receiving love. But love is always ultimately capital L. Because God is love. We don't make love happen. We just open ourselves to it. The image I use is of sleep. I'd have like 5 little rituals I use to fall asleep, but I can't make sleep come. I do these things and then I roll over and wait. Some days aren't quite as good as others, or some days. Any other questions? Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Please.
I was thinking that in relationship, especially those married couple, that one person reveals himself to the other affirms what is good in that person. I think that goes back from the time of creation, whenever they found out they were naked, but they were not ashamed. So that goes on all your whole life. You reveal yourself.
Yes. His point was that the revelation that happens in marriage and relationship goes back to the very beginning, when Adam and Eve found out they didn't have to be ashamed of their nakedness. That to learn how to be naked heart to heart is a phenomenal experience. And part of the phenomenon of that experience is we're sharing in the revelation of God himself. That God is revealed, unveiled for us every time we get to know another human being. Both happen at the same time, 1 John says, and Matthew 26, or 25. When I get to know you, I'm getting to know God. When I'm loving you, I'm loving God. And that when I learn how to trust you, I'm learning how to trust God. And if I say I trust God, 1 John says, and don't trust other human beings, then I'm a liar. And the power of a revelation. Somebody told me once that when somebody tells you something in trust, you're changed forever. And I really believe that. Questions? Please.
Talk a little bit more about, I guess, the 20-something generation with their individuality. And I have 2 kids kind of in that range, and it seems to me that it's so difficult for them, even young people, some even in their 30s that are still single, that it seems that it's so difficult for them to make those committed relationships because the individuality is so strong.
Yeah.
That it's, I don't know, just talk more about that.
She brought up the issue again of college kids. She's got a couple of college kids herself, and the idolization, the idol of the individuality of a person is sometimes making it almost impossible to cross over into couple, into union. Like I said, I think we got the one side down great, they got the other side down great, and I'm hoping if we keep the conversation going, especially in churches, where the image we have of divine majesty is Trinity, where they're individuals, always, yes, and forever, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and, not but, and profoundly one. And therefore, the most satisfying human experience is to become myself even as I am becoming closer to you. It's the most profound human experience because it's God. It's how the Trinity works. It's the economy of the Trinity, of a triune God. So that if we're in a profound friendship, I mean, if we've been friends over the years, I should be becoming more Gary and you more yourself, and we should be closer and closer and closer to each other so that I get to know you better and you get to know me better, and there's that commitment and unity and willingness to sacrifice. So I don't know that we got it down on the unity part. We're better at that, actually. But I still see so many couples, especially women, trying to emerge, trying to figure out who they are in this relationship, or when they're moms, you know? How does a woman become herself when she's a mother of 3 kids, you know? How does she, and yet how does she totally love those kids? But I'm telling you, it can happen, and sometimes it's hit or miss. But the answer is always both and. Always both and, because that's the triune mystery. Both and. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and absolute unity. Make sense? So let's just keep in the conversation with them. Let's tell them, let's show them the benefits of sacrificing some of those individuality things. Let's help them appreciate the power of sacrifice. I have said here before in another talk a while back that I think the greatest problem the generation I'm working with most of my day is having is it's their problem with their faith. And it's not because they can't define these things, it's that they've never learned how to see their suffering in God. That a lot of times when they leave religion, it's because they're hurting. And unlike us, me, my generation, who grew up with Stations of the Cross and crucifixes and perpetual help devotions and those kinds of things that always made it okay for me to suffer. And it's not that we don't offer them these things, because I've tried to offer it to them, they just don't come sometimes. Our newest attempt next Lent is going to be yoga stations. We're going to have them, do every station like in yoga. And we might pack them in, whoever, I don't care. I just want them to know when it hurts, God's there. When it hurts, God's there. And they have created some of the most devious ways of numbing the pain or of getting around suffering. And a lot of the promiscuity, I'm going to suggest a lot of the hookup culture, is because it's and a lot of drugs, I don't know if I said that, it's so much about avoiding pain. So when you say, the pain of merging from myself to merge into coupling to a relationship, they got to be okay with that pain. They got to, as I said earlier, trust it. This is what's going to create me and make me even more individual. It won't be compromised. I can trust the love. I can trust the merging. But that's, like I said, hit or miss. And
But merging with someone can be very painful too, and that's very difficult.
exactly. She said that can be painful to merge. Yeah, life hurts. That's another thing we just got to teach them. It's just, what was the one book that started out, Life is Hard?
Life is difficult.
Life is difficult. And that's a fair statement. And they don't have to numb that. There's going to be life in there. Remember what I said about love and the hunger, and that's where God is. If they can love that space between what they have and don't have, that's where God's going to come to them. That's the image of the virgin birth for our tradition. When you're most empty,